Ever since I started this channel, I've made it crystal clear that I believe children's movies shouldn't be too mature or emotionally complex. I mean, I'm not against telling a compelling story with some more adult undertones, but a lot of content animation companies have been putting out are taking it way too far in recent years. Now, a common defense of animated movies being so mature, especially the likes of Disney and Pixar, is that animation shouldn't be exclusively for children and that it was never meant to be that way. And that is very true. Walt Disney made his movies kid-friendly mainly due to the censorship of the era, as all content was required to be suitable for all audiences, as well as the fact that he did have a special love for children. But the point is that he always wanted his movies, shorts, and everything else he made to be enjoyed by audiences of all kinds. And the same applies to current day Disney management as well, who have said that they don't make their movies with children in mind and just make sure they don't take it too far. And boy, does it show! But the thing is, though both old and modern Disney are in agreement that their movies are meant to be enjoyed by everybody, how they go about it and what their definition of entertainment actually is are extremely different things. And today, I'd like to try and articulate the difference between them to help better demonstrate why I keep insisting that Disney's modern day approach, which is heavily influenced by Pixar, is simply too mature for younger audiences. And there will be spoilers for a few Disney movies ahead, so in case there's something you aren't totally caught up on, you might just want to keep on the lookout. You have been warned. Okay, so I know I already went over most of this topic in my Pixar Problems series, and if you'd like to see it, a link to the playlist will be in the description. But due to wanting to cover so much, I feel I glossed over some of the more important details I briefly mentioned. Because as I go into at length about in the second part, Pixar, and therefore modern Disney, prioritize the story above all else when it comes to their movies, while Walt Disney was famously annoyed by the notion of a complex plot, as he felt it often took away from what made movies fun. Now listen, I've written books, and I will freely admit that I think the plot is a very important element to any story, and perhaps the most important thing, period. But that doesn't mean Walt Disney didn't know what he was talking about, or that there isn't something to be said for the way he made his movies. And to perhaps best demonstrate that point, take a look at The Jungle Book. Because the crew was famously concerned with the fact that there was barely any narrative to speak of, but the final product was exactly what Walt Disney wanted, and it's gone on to be considered an animated classic. But when you really think about it, why is it so well regarded even today? The plot is a pretty loose one, it's not a very faithful adaptation, and Mowgli isn't exactly the best main character ever. But, as Walt Disney himself had to explain to the crew on a number of occasions, the movie isn't about any of those things. What Disney wanted was a movie full of fun and memorable characters, as well as a bunch of great gags for those characters. And because of that, the movie is incredibly fun to watch and has just enough of an overarching story for things to keep moving along until they reach a satisfying conclusion. Basically, what it lacks in narrative, it makes up for in fun and entertainment. And in the end, that's what Walt Disney's movies were really all about. To put it another way, Have you ever wondered why the mice get so much focus in Cinderella, or that the three fairies appear to be the real main characters of Sleeping Beauty instead of Aurora? Well, it's because they're funny. And to Walt Disney, a movie was only as good as the gags you put in it. To him, it was about the humor and fun first and foremost. And in many ways, this does make sense, considering he started out making animated comedy shorts, where the whole purpose is pretty much to fit as many gags as possible into a given time frame. It just so happened that he knew how to translate that into a feature film without overdoing it, because even he knew how much was too much. So the point is, because he prioritized funny characters and situations over the story, making his movies for everybody was a lot more about making sure the humor didn't lean too far in one direction so that both kids and adults would enjoy and laugh at what they were seeing. Now, I know some might counter this by pointing out that there are quite a few movies made during Walt Disney's lifetime that aren't all that funny, and that is most definitely true. But that mainly comes from the fact that Walt Disney didn't make his movies just to be funny. That was important for him, yes, but that wasn't always his highest priority, because he saw animation as an art form, and plenty of his movies reflect that aspect of him as well, particularly the likes of Bambi and Fantasia, because while both have some of his trademark gags, they're a lot more about the art of animation itself. Whether to depict animals in nature as close to real life as possible, or employing some of the most impressive 2D animation ever to bring a visual concert to life, Disney proved himself to be a true innovator of a craft where virtually anything was possible. And because complex art is by nature more adult, that's why his works that reflect more on that side of him tend to be more liked among adults than kids, because that appeals more to them. To put it simply, Walt Disney spent most of his life trying to prove that animation wasn't just for kids, and his many movies actually prove that because they're very universal in nature. Again, in any given movie, the two things that were most important to him were how funny they were and how artistically they were made. Now, sure, some definitely prioritized one over the other, but the fact still remains that these movies were decidedly suitable for children, even if they wouldn't always appreciate the more artistic parts or find certain scenes intense or confusing. But either way, that's a big reason why his movies are still loved by children even today. With Pixar's approach, however, it's all about telling a complex story with the characters going on an intense physical and emotional journey, and it all feels like stuff that adults will take a lot more away from than children ever will. Now, once again, as a writer myself, I'm not trying to say that having a tightly written story is a bad thing. Far from it. It's just that Disney has gotten way too complex in recent years. The Disney Renaissance knew a lot better how to mix Walt Disney's signature brand of gags and fun with a more intricate story, and majorly benefited from not getting too complex with it all. Like, for example, Beauty and the Beast has the simple message that beauty comes within, and by respecting the fact that children will be watching it, it's able to deliver that in a way that they can understand. And that's what Disney has lost recently. Their messages and themes have become so adult-oriented that children are barely apt to understand them, to the point that it feels like they put gags in just to keep them entertained, instead of the jokes being a major reason why they are making the movie in the first place. And as I noted in other videos, I believe this change is best reflected in the way Wish was written. Because as I explained in my video talking about the movie, which you can also find a link in the description too, these modern Disney writers set out to write a Walt Disney movie without any understanding of how, because all they know is Pixar's way of doing things. For example, they try to make the dynamic between Asha and King Magnifico a classic tale of black and white morality. But because I'm pretty sure they don't even know what that is anymore, they make the story too complex for it to feel that way and leave the audience confused as all heck. And on top of that, though there are funny moments and gags to be had, most of it doesn't feel exactly Disney. To put it simply, for anybody trying to say that there isn't a major difference between how Walt Disney and modern Disney makes their movies, Wish's failed attempt at merging the two is more than enough proof of that. Now, part of this can be attributed to the eras these writers come from, because it's true. In different time periods, different things were definitely a priority for the writers. In Walt Disney's day, his simpler style of storytelling in favor of funny gags or art was more acceptable because that's what a lot of entertainment was like. Audiences cared a lot more about being entertained, and if certain elements of the story had to be glossed over, then they were fine with that so long as it made the intended story better. But these days, it's a lot more about having an intense emotional experience, keeping everything as close to reality as possible, and special effects. That's why The Jungle Book was successful in its day with a very simplistic approach and emphasis on gags and entertainment value over the story, while the live-action remake was also acclaimed for having more emphasis put on the story and the emotional journey of the characters. Both reflect the values of entertainment in the era they were made. But that being said, is anybody going to deny that the animated version is a lot more suitable for children and just overall more fun? Now, once again, I'm not saying that all animated movies should try to be made in Walt Disney's personal style, or that having a complex and emotional story automatically means it can't be suitable for children. Again, something like The Lion King proves that very notion dead wrong. But where that movie succeeds compared to more recent Disney movies is that it both balances being funny and serious in much more equal measure, allowing for plenty of levity to the often intense drama. And just like with Beauty and the Beast, it knows how to deliver its message in a way that children will understand. Just because adults are apt to understand it all a little better doesn't mean that children won't be able to take away all the important elements from it, if in a more simple way. And as I just said, what also helps is that it knows when and how to use the humor so that the story doesn't become too intense for them. It knows that children will be watching and accommodates for that instead of doing the bare minimum to make it suitable for them. Okay, so hopefully I've explained myself well enough in this video that just because Disney has always had the mentality that their movies aren't just for children and that adults can enjoy them just as much, doesn't mean that they haven't gone about it differently over time, or that they once did it better than they do now. because Walt Disney's style was a lot more universal in how it appeals to people. Since, as I already spoke at length about, he was a lot more concerned with good characters, humor, gags, and heart, which are things adults and children can enjoy in equal measure. It was only in his more artistic movies that things become more adult-oriented, and even then it was usually simple enough for a child to still follow, if not totally understand. But with the way Disney writes their movies now, being heavily influenced by Pixar's more mature style, it makes it feel as if they're blatantly leaving the children in the dust, and nobody seems to have any issue with that. I mean, some of the emotional moments in these movies, it's just too complex for a child to understand or appreciate, and often there aren't many gags or jokes to make up for it. Though I'm also not trying to imply that I think children are simpletons who will enjoy anything that's put in front of them so long as it's funny, because as I've said in many other videos, I actually think the exact opposite. I believe that children are a lot smarter than most give them credit for. But the fact still remains that there are certain concepts that they just cannot comprehend until they've reached a certain age. And those just so happen to be all the concepts that modern Disney, Pixar, and quite a few other animation studios love addressing. And as I've also noted in other videos, if they want to make their movies for adults, that's fine. I'd even support them if they did. But they should just come right out and say it, instead of trying to hide behind children to get respect. That's what Walt Disney did, as he was always transparent about the fact that he made his movies just as much for adults as he did children. And ironically, his movies were a lot more kid-friendly in nature than a lot of supposed children's movies are today. Alright, I think I've more than made my point with all of this. So now I'd like to hear what you guys think. Do you believe that the Walt Disney Company has strayed too far away from what their creator wanted out of his movies for their own good? Or do you believe it's a good thing that Disney has learned so much from Pixar's style of storytelling? Please feel free to let me know in the comments below. And like I always say, you do not have to agree with anything I said in this video if you don't want to. You are entitled to your own opinion, and if you think I've got it all completely backwards, that is absolutely fine. And thank you all for watching. It is all very much appreciated, and I hope to see you all next time.